The laughter echoed through the marble-lined lobby of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel like a cruel symphony. James Wellington III, tech billionaire and CEO of Wellington Enterprises, stood surrounded by his executive team, his voice dripping with condescension as he addressed the Filipino cleaning lady who had just politely asked if he needed fresh towels in his penthouse suite. "Elena, right?" James said, not bothering to look up from his platinum watch. "Maybe you should focus less on bothering guests and more on learning proper English. That accent of yours is unprofessional." Elena Vasquez stood perfectly still, her cleaning cart positioned beside her like a shield. At 45, she had worked at the Grand Metropolitan for 8 years, always arriving before dawn and leaving after sunset. Her English, though accented, was clear and respectful. But to men like James Wellington, anything less than perfect diction was grounds for mockery. "I apologize, sir," Elena replied quietly, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "I will be more careful with my speech." "You should," James continued, his colleagues snickering like schoolyard bullies. "This is a 5-star establishment, not some strip mall. Our international clients expect better. Maybe take some ESL classes when you're not mopping." The word mopping fell from his lips like a slur. Elena's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on her cart handle, but her expression remained professionally neutral. She had learned long ago that men like James Wellington saw people like her as furniture, useful, but ultimately invisible and replaceable. "Of course, Mr. Wellington," she said, beginning to push her cart away. "Enjoy your evening, sir." As Elena disappeared into the service elevator, James turned back to his team with a satisfied smirk. God help they hire these days. No standards anymore. What James Wellington didn't know, what his arrogance prevented him from seeing, was that Elena Vasquez understood every word of his conversation with his associates, including the part spoken in Mandarin about his failing business deal with Chinese investors, and the whispered concerns in French about his company's financial troubles. If this story of hidden talent and misplaced pride is already touching your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will completely change how you see the power of underestimating someone. 3 days later, the Grand Metropolitan's executive conference room buzzed with tension. James Wellington paced behind floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, his usual confidence replaced by barely contained panics. The $2.8 billion merger with Chinese tech giant Dragon Tech was falling apart, and James knew his company wouldn't survive without it. "The translator we hired doesn't understand the technical terminology," explained Sarah Chen, Wellington's head of international relations. "Mr. Liu's team is frustrated. They say we're wasting their time with miscommunications." James slammed his hand on the mahogany conference table. "This deal cannot fail. My entire company is leveraged on this merger. Find me someone who speaks fluent Mandarin and understands technology. I don't care what it costs." 20 floors below, Elena Vasquez methodically cleaned the hotel's business center, her movements efficient and practiced. As she dusted the computers, she couldn't help but notice the abandoned documents scattered across the desks, contracts in multiple languages, technical specifications in broken translations, and email printouts showing increasingly desperate communications from Wellington Enterprises. David Morrison, the hotel's general manager, entered the business center, carrying his usual afternoon coffee. At 42, David had worked in hospitality for 2 decades, and he had developed a keen eye for reading both guests and staff. He had noticed Elena's quiet intelligence, her careful attention to details that other cleaning staff missed. "Elena," David said, setting down his coffee, "I've been meaning to ask, where did you learn to organize documents so precisely? You always seem to understand what papers go together, even when they're in different languages." Elena paused in her dusting, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I have always been interested in reading, Mr. Morrison. Different languages. They are like puzzles, no?" "Indeed they are," David replied, studying her more carefully. "How many languages do you read?" "A few," Elena said modestly, returning to her work. But David noticed how she had unconsciously straightened a stack of Chinese contracts, aligning them perfectly with their English counterparts. Meanwhile, upstairs in the penthouse, James Wellington was having the worst week of his professional life. The Chinese delegation had walked out of their second meeting in frustration, and his board of directors was questioning his leadership. The interpreter he'd hired from the city's most expensive translation service had proven inadequate, missing crucial technical nuances that were costing him millions. What James didn't realize was that his salvation walked the halls of his hotel every day, invisible to his prejudiced eyes. Elena had been quietly observing his desperate attempts to save his business, understanding every frustrated conversation, every panicked phone call, every whispered concern about bankruptcy. If James had looked beyond his own arrogance, he might have noticed the woman who could solve all his problems. But pride, as Elena's grandmother used to say, often blinds us to the very help we need most. The crisis came to a head on Thursday morning when Dragontech's CEO, Mr. Liu Wei, stormed out of the conference room, his interpreter scrambling to keep up. James Wellington stood frozen as his $2.8 billion lifeline disappeared into the elevator. "Mr. Wellington," Sarah Chen said, her voice shaking, "Mr. Liu says we've insulted him with our amateur communications. The deal is off. They're flying back to Shanghai tonight." James felt his world crumbling. Without this merger, Wellington Enterprises would be bankrupt within 6 months. 20,000 employees would lose their jobs. His father's legacy would be destroyed. Elena was cleaning the conference room when she overheard James's desperate phone call to his lawyers. He was speaking in rapid, panicked English, occasionally slipping into broken French when he thought he wasn't being understood by his staff. "Find me anyone who can speak perfect Mandarin and understands blockchain technology," James pleaded into his phone. "I'll pay $1 million if they can save this deal." Elena continued dusting silently, but her mind was racing. She understood every technical term James had mentioned, knew exactly what the Chinese delegation wanted, and could see the simple miscommunications that had derailed everything. David Morrison appeared in the doorway, having witnessed the morning's disaster. "Elena," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Elena looked up from her work, her expression calm but attentive. "How well do you really speak Mandarin?" For a moment, Elena hesitated. Then, in flawless Mandarin with a Beijing accent, she replied, "Better than the translator Mr. Wellington hired, I believe." David's eyes widened. "And the other languages? How many do you actually speak?" Elena set down her cleaning cloth and met his gaze directly. 9 languages fluently, sir. And I understand the blockchain technology they've been discussing, the problems in their negotiations. They are not complex, just misunderstood. At that moment, James Wellington burst back into the conference room, his face red with frustration and desperation. He stopped short when he saw Elena still cleaning, his expression twisting with irritation. "Why is the cleaning lady still here?" he snapped at David. "I need privacy for business calls." David looked between James and Elena, then made a decision that would change everything. "Mr. Wellington, I think you should listen to what Elena has to say about your Chinese clients." "What?" James laughed harshly. "You think the maid has business advice? David, I don't have time for jokes. My company is dying." Elena stepped forward, her voice quiet but clear. "Mr. Wellington, your Chinese partners left because you offered them only a 15% stake in the AI division, but they need 25% to satisfy their board's requirements. Also, you've been using simplified Chinese characters in your contracts, but Dragon Tech prefers traditional characters for formal documents. These details matter greatly in Chinese business culture." The room fell completely silent. James stared at Elena as if seeing her for the first time. "How do you know that?" he whispered. "Because I have been listening, sir," Elena replied simply. "And because I understand what you need to make this deal work. This transformation is about to shock everyone in the room. Share your thoughts in the comments about how quickly we judge others." What happened next would be talked about in the Grand Metropolitan Hotel for years to come. James Wellington, a man who had built his fortune on recognizing talent and opportunity, stood face to face with a woman he had dismissed as beneath his notice and realized he was looking at his salvation. "You're telling me," James said slowly, "that you understand everything about this deal?" Elena nodded calmly. "Yes, sir. I also know that Mr. Liu's assistant mentioned they are willing to negotiate until 6 p.m. today, but only if someone shows them proper respect and understands their cultural protocols." James turned to David, his mind reeling. How is this possible? Elena answered for herself, her voice carrying a quiet dignity that commanded attention. "Mr. Wellington, before I came to America, I worked as a senior interpreter for the United Nations in Geneva. I specialized in Asian Pacific economic conferences. I speak Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, Korean, Russian, French, German, Spanish, and Tagalog." The revelation hit James like a physical blow. "The UN? But why are you working as a cleaning lady?" Elena finished gently. "Because when I came to America, my credentials were not recognized. I needed work immediately to support my family. The Grand Metropolitan gave me a job when no one else would. I have been grateful for this opportunity." David Morrison stepped forward, his voice filled with amazement. "Elena, why didn't you ever tell anyone about your background?" Elena smiled sadly. "Who would have believed the cleaning lady, Mr. Morrison? People see what they expect to see." James Wellington, for the first time in his adult life, felt truly ashamed. Here was a woman he had mocked and dismissed, who possessed exactly the skills that could save his empire, and she had been invisible to him because of his own prejudices. "Elena," James said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "can you help me? Can you fix this?" "I can try, sir," Elena replied, "but first, you must be willing to listen and learn. Chinese business culture values respect above all else. You will need to approach Mr. Liu with humility." What followed was the most intensive crash course in international diplomacy James Wellington had ever received. Elena explained the intricacies of Chinese business protocol, the importance of face-saving gestures, and the specific technical terms that had been lost in translation. By 4 p.m., Elena had crafted a new proposal in perfect traditional Chinese, complete with cultural references that showed deep respect for Dragon Tech's corporate philosophy. James practiced his pronunciation under her patient guidance, learning to properly address Mr. Liu and his team. When the Chinese delegation arrived for the final meeting, they were surprised to find James Wellington standing at the conference room entrance, bowing respectfully in the traditional manner. Elena stood beside him, no longer in her cleaning uniform, but in a professional suit that David had quickly procured from the hotel's boutique. "Mr. Liu," James said in carefully practiced Mandarin, "I apologize deeply for our earlier misunderstandings. I would like to introduce Elena Vasquez, our senior cultural liaison, who will ensure our communications honor your company's distinguished traditions." For the next 3 hours, Elena facilitated negotiations with a skill that left everyone in the room amazed. She seamlessly translated not just words but cultural meanings, helping both sides understand not just what was being said, but what was truly meant. When Mr. Liu finally stood to shake James's hand, sealing the $2.8 billion deal, he turned to Elena and said in Mandarin, "It has been an honor to work with someone who truly understands both cultures. You have a rare gift." Elena translated his words for James, adding quietly, "He says the deal is successful because both sides were finally able to truly hear each other." 3 months later, Elena Vasquez was appointed as Wellington Enterprises Director of International Relations, with a salary that reflected her true value. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel created a new program to identify and develop the hidden talents of all their employees, regardless of their current positions. James Wellington, humbled by the experience, established a foundation to help international professionals get their credentials recognized in America. He often told the story of how his greatest business success came from learning to see past his own prejudices. As for Elena, she kept a small cleaning cloth in her executive office desk drawer, a reminder that dignity is not determined by job titles, and that wisdom can be found in the most unexpected places. The merger with Dragon Tech made Wellington Enterprises one of the world's leading tech companies. But James knew the real victory was learning that respect and humility are the most valuable business assets of all. If you believe that everyone deserves to be seen for their true potential, subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove the most extraordinary people are often hiding in plain sight.